I decided that I will change up the format for the Undermind a little. This is a pre-recorded start section. I will announce important news and maybe sponsored messages here in the future and never during the podcast as to not disrupt the flow of the conversation. For now, I only ask that if you enjoyed the show, please consider supporting Making Computer Do Things on Patreon. Even $1 counts, and that could help improve the production quality of the Undermind, offset hosting costs for the site, and keep the SCHNAIL servers running, just to name a few key areas. You can do so on patreon.com/mcdt. Thank you for your consideration, and now let's get into it. Good evening and welcome to the 40th episode of the Undermind podcast. Oh my god, it's the 40th. It sounds so high number. And my guests today, my guests today are Freakling. Hi Freakling, how are you?
Okay, now it works. I'm fine, thank you.
And Ankmairdor, who is having maybe some issues, but anytime you want to, Ank, just interrupt us and you can join. So I think we should start. In the meantime, there are some news, actually a lot of news that I want to share with you all, or y'all. I so want to be able to do a southern accent, but I never could. So, first of all, most of the news is about SCHNAIL, of course, the StarCraft Human and AI League, because I've been working on it like every waking hour I could. So, there a lot of stuff happened. First of all, the one great feature that I wanted to implement, and it is working now, is automating bot testing. That means that if you upload a bot to SCHNAIL, which you can do if you register on schnail.com and then contact me to allow your account, and if you're a bot author, you're automatically invited to the closed beta. I can't say this enough because it is still a surprise to some people. So if you upload a bot, it will be automatically evaluated against a passive bot, which does not do anything. This is just to make sure that your bot actually works in every map you enabled your bot in. So that was the first part, and the second part, and this is a big one for gamers who want to do this, because this is the number one requested feature, whining, bothering, and every other kind of harassment we had to endure about SCHNAIL. Yes, we have custom hotkeys implemented for 1.16 version of the game. The UI is not complete yet, but it is working. You can set the custom hotkeys and you can press different buttons for your game, just like in StarCraft Remastered. So actually, I finished that, not finished that up, but finished the concept up today, and I can't thank enough the two people who contributed on that, and one was Jaegers and the other was Bytekeeper, so thank you guys. I'm not saying I couldn't have done it without you, because I'm very smart, but it would have taken me a lot longer. So thanks again, and it will be released soon. Okay, that are the two features, and there are 2 or 3 other features left to implement until we can go to open beta. Open beta where everyone can participate, meaning like literally everyone, you can just download it. We are not quite there yet, but I think in a few weeks, like 1 or 2 weeks, it is a reality. I don't want to commit to deadlines because, yeah, SCHNAIL budget is still like 10 pretzels a month or something, so not really. Okay, and still SCHNAIL news, we are not done yet. We have been talks with some very great people about streaming SCHNAIL games, and one of those is the Bombastic Star League's Chobo players, and quite a few of them had agreed to do that, and they will play some show matches against the best of bots, and we will cast it. We, meaning me, Zero, and maybe another famous caster who I am not allowed to reveal just yet, and of course it might not happen. And the second on the ladder, and I've been talking with Antiga, and he wanted to organize show matches against the AIST winner, who is Locutus, a great bot by Bruce Nielsen and a father of shallow copies. So a best of 5 game series versus a pro gamer, and that has been achieved. We are we are in talks with none other than Cadenzi herself, a great pro player. Go look her up, she's awesome. And date is not set yet, but it is happening and you will know about it. So prepare yourselves. And the last news about it, about SCHNAIL streams, is none other than motherfucking Artosis Stamkowski has agreed, well, not agreed, but announced on the Pylon show that he will play these bots soon. So that caused me great amounts of joy. Again, no concrete date was set, but it will happen. And that is all that I want to say, and maybe I should let my guests talk a little if you have any questions about, well, anything. Okay then, and Freakling, you said, I hope that's not a secret, that you will, or you want to make a version of Inner Coven for SCHNAIL and bot usage. Are you still committed to that idea?
Or BWCL. And prepare my torture chamber for whoever that guy is who wrote the algorithm for pathfinding regions back in the day.
I think we all share your pain.
It must be done. It really must be done at this point, I think.
Yes, so maybe the torches and pitchforks will come out if we finally find the guy. Oh, by the way, there are some new bots on the SCHNAIL letter. Maybe I mentioned that in the last cast, but let's mention it again. Some bots from the University of Bratislava. So welcome, guys, and hope you will enjoy your stay. Okay, and let's talk about Inner Coven, because I think that's an awesome map, and it was played in the ASL last season. How should I characterize this? So it was played in ASL, and it is my belief that it changed the metagame a little bit.
Changed the metagame. It pretty much got its own metagame because it's a very non-standard map. So yeah, the metagame on it. It's still changing, it seems, yes.
Yeah, that's maybe a little bit more precise characterization of events that transpired. Look at my fancy words. So yeah, I really like that map, and I hope that we can upload it, and I will upload a map pool. Well, not just ASL, but I intend to upload the Pro Leagues map pools to SCHNAIL, because you don't have to enable your bot on the new maps. So why not? And the basic idea for this cast was to discuss map analysis, and we
Okay. Well, I was about to say, if I play or if I go on Snail, will I get points for every bot that's beaten by my map, or do I have to play myself?
I will award you 1.5 good boy points for every occasion. I don't know. There are no kind of
Okay.
scoring system yet.
Scoring, or do I have a working meta, or?
I think there is just a binary bot evaluation. Either your bot works or not. But other than that, we don't actually have player scores yet. Do you want to actually talk about it? Because I've mentioned it, but you weren't on that precise podcast. I can just reiterate my points about that.
What?
Of player scores and calculating a bot strengths with some numerical display.
Okay, go on. Just
Okay, so
that's a short sentence.
yes. Maybe we should do it like radio transmission that say over. Okay, so the problem is that bots don't have any kind of scoring system that is comparable to humans. They have strengths measured relative to other bots. In the SCHNAIL ladder, you can see that, but that is not quite comparable to human scores because they are on a different ladder. And how do I actually measure the bot strengths? Because the problem is that bots are often exploitable. If you find one build that beats a bot, then probably that build will work every time, and that makes it really hard. And the skill of the humans playing against the bots is not equal. So I'm kind of forced to assign a score to the human playing as well. So I have to weigh the number of games somehow, maybe, and I think the best way would be if I would make a ladder where you can play a ranked game, and when you play a ranked game, you don't get to pick your opponent like you can do it now on SCHNAIL. So you
What wouldn't it be best if you would just anonymize the bots completely and just have humans play against random bots then, and they don't know which bot it is, so they don't know which abusive build would work?
Actually, I haven't thought about that, but that's a good idea. I will look into it how to do that. That's simple yet elegant. Although you can kind of recognize some bots by their playstyles, but this is a step in the right direction.
That at least means you have to be in the game for a while and have to scout the bot and stuff like that. So, and you really have to know. You have to know the bot more intimately than just by its name, and the build that worked last time, I'll do it again. But you'll actually have to find out at least what the bot is by scouting it. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
It's not trivial to come by the information which what you're playing then.
Well, you can still kind of kind of see it from the logs, but I will look into it. I can't really see it. And meanwhile, we got a question in the chat that Inner Coven 1.05 works on the 1.16 version of the map. I don't know if by saying that you want to make a version for 1.16, you mean that the current version is working, just has some problems, or is it not working at all?
The version currently in the ASL uses some of the new ramp tiles that are exclusive to patch 1.22 and later. So they don't. That doesn't work under 1.16. I'd have to replace all those tiles. I have a working 1.16 version already because I used that myself for testing purposes. But of course, it looks like shit because it's just the same tile spammed all over again just to make it work. So what I basically need to do is give it a bit of a cosmetic overhaul before I released that. And version we are even talking about, 105. What's 105? Oh yeah, that's that one. Well, yeah, that was the last version I actually finished before ASL. The only real difference, between between version 105 and the ASL version is that the ASL version has the disruption webs on the corridors to the middle replaced or removed and put some building blocks there instead. Well, I think there's also some difference in how the turrets are placed in the neutral ring bases, but yeah. But version 105 also doesn't work under patch 116. I think the only one that I uploaded that works under patch 116 is version 102, I think it is, which is pretty much by original.
Okay. By the way, I had a question last time. I didn't get a chance to ask. Can you make neutral units hostile? Like, can you place down a missile turret that is neutral but fires on everyone? Because it's technically another player, right? Yeah, so my thought was, how about just as a wacky concept, make a map that is actively hostile towards you? And I'm not sure that you can make that with basic...
No, you can't do that. You can't change alignment of player, or you can't change whether the neutral player is allied or hostile to any other player. So no, and you also can't place any units for any other player than neutral on a melee. You can, but it won't show in game, so you can't effectively. So no, that's not possible.
Yeah, I guess you can do it with use map settings, but that's not
that wouldn't be accepted for any melee league. So they're not a proper melee map.
Was there any time when people played UMS games seriously, like in a league format? I didn't really hear about that ever.
What do you mean by UMS? UMS can be anything, so, but I don't know. I don't think there was ever a UMS map that's really become big like Dota has for Warcraft 3, for example, but apart from that, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's been so long and so many maps have been made that probably at least someone did some for fun small little tournament on something at some point, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think so. We would have heard from it by now, but I remember playing a lot of fun UMS maps back in the day. There was one that was everyone playing in my friend group, and it was Dragon Ball themed. It wasn't any good, but it had units named after Dragon Ball characters, and that was all we needed.
Yeah.
Then again, we were like 13 at the time. So let's get back to map analysis, and I recall some discussion that you had with Ank in the SCHNAIL Discord and the problems thereof. So can you describe the basic problem statement and what you actually want to test, or want a tool to test it, or maybe I don't know, enlist our help with that.
Which one are you talking about? I posted quite a few questions lately.
Well, let's talk.
You're pretty immensely helpful, I must say. You really know your stuff.
Let's talk about them in order. Like
why ultralisks aren't affected by, or almost aren't affected by green goo. What's it called? Ensnare,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah, and I think the conclusion was they are affected. It's just such a minuscule amount, and some random timer screws it up anyway. So basically, it doesn't matter.
Well, the basic problem was that the Ultralisk's attack animation is almost as long as its cooldown. So even if you kind of and the timer, of course, yes. So if it isn't slowed down by Ensnare, it will randomly have a very long cooldown every 3 attacks because its animation is longer than its cooldown, and then it will go into a waiting period of 9 frames. That's the answer. Yes, it was very it's weird. It's another example of very bad coding of the game, I guess. But yeah.
I think this game design paradigm could be characterized as because fuck you, that's why. And what was the
works? Don't question it. we have to get it done. We can't care for the details.
I can't relate. I didn't do any rush coding or a workaround or shitty solutions in SCHNAIL at all. That is not something that I would do. Wink, wink.
But you're working on it alone and probably don't have any even imaginary deadline to adhere to, or I don't know. Usually if many people work on something, it gets chaotic. So
definitely right, and that's basically what I'm doing since I'm not working on it alone, but I contribute like 90% of the code base, and therefore sometimes I cut corners, but I really shouldn't. I must say it, and I usually clean it up after, but you know how it goes.
I assume it's just like there's one team working on the code, and there's the art team probably who worked on the sprites and the iScripts, and then it didn't really fit together, something like that.
It is my impression that when StarCraft was released, Blizzard was still a relatively small studio, and they basically everyone did everything. And I think this is my feeling because while looking at the code, everything is kind of intertwined, and you get the feeling that one guy could do almost everything. Of course, that must have been an art team and different roles, but it wasn't as separate as it is now for a modern gaming company. But I really don't know.
Yeah.
There are some great war stories about StarCraft development by Patrick Wyatt, one of the ex-Blizzard developers, so you should check that out. I will try to find a link.
I think I've read them probably. It's the same guy that wrote the article about pathfinding, right?
Yes, that's the famous article about pathfinding, but that is a part of an article.
Way too vague and keeps getting people some weird and wrong ideas still, but yeah. Then I probably have read it. You don't need to send me the link.
Yeah, but I will include it in the podcast post description. So, okay, where did we start with all of this? Oh yeah, the problem statement. So what was next after the Ultralisk thing? What was the next problem that you were discussing after the Ultralisk thing?
What have I asked? Oh, already forgot. I think I also brought up the we had at some point we had a little bit talk about vortex bugs, and someone actually could provide me with a link to the exact code that shows this the getting unstuck behavior that doesn't work in that case. asked. Of course, we had now the talk about my mining tracker that I'm planning to do, which I'll hopefully be able to begin working at next week when I'm done with updating maps. And I think there was something else.
Yeah, the mining tracker, I think it's relatively easy to implement. After all, it's just, at the end of the day, it's just statistics collection. And, well, in the process, there is this saying, if you gaze into the abyss long enough, the abyss also gazes into you. I guess you got involved with the bot community so long that you became a bot author yourself. Because technically that's what you're doing, right?
A bot?
Bot author. Because
technically... Bot author, you become a bot, you mean?
No, I mean you engage with this community.
I mean, it comes to anything about worker mining behavior, I guess I've become the abyss already. I've spent so many hours watching those little buggers doing crazy stuff that, well... I mean, I can now just watch them in a map, and I know exactly, okay, this worker is doing what it's supposed to do, and that worker is not doing what it's supposed to do. So, yeah, it's a bit weird. But, yeah, putting numbers on it and really understanding how it works with the hidden timers and stuff, that's really the last thing that's to do, I think, with regards to, well, what's actually map making relevant.
And you're still designing these maps mainly for humans. That means that if the mining rates are, for different bases, the mining rates are equal on average in the long run. That's basically good enough, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there are multiple complications in making mining rates on average equal, of course. Like different races have different mining rates. So and like different mineral patches mine differently, whether they are on the left side of a resource depot or on the exact mirrored spot on the right side. Some weird stuff like that. And of course, mining rates can change when worker saturation increases. So ideally, you would want that for each race, if you have the same race, if both players have the same race, no matter where they spawn, they have the same mining rate on average over all kinds of worker saturations, right? I don't know. I've done a lot of in-game testing, and I mean, generally, differences in mining rates get less if you have more workers on the minerals, because, of course, lost time due to inefficient paths gets less significant compared to lost time due to worker migration between different patches, which, unless you have one mineral line spread apart very far and the other one very compact, that tends to be more similar. So unless you have some of these bugs where your workers actually migrate behind the mineral line.
Yeah, that's just weird. And I guess to a lesser degree, the same applies for gas mining as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, on 1 to 3 workers, mining rates can be very different. But of course, like on a good spot, you have like about 300 gas per minute, and on a bad spot, you might have 240 or lower, right? So 20% loss or 20% deficit easily. If you put 4 workers on it, obviously you get full mining rates on almost all for almost all positions. So, yeah.
20% is quite significant. 20% is a quite significant figure.
You can't really even under ideal circumstances, you can't really push it below 10. But at least you can do that. So.
Yes, so good luck with that, and like I said, I would like to help you with it, but I'm swamped with work already. But I think the community is quite helpful in your endeavors, and well, we like having you screwing around with BW API.
Well, it's one thing to consider whether I use BW API or do something with Open Boudoir code, which might also be an option because it, of course, gives you much more direct access to the behind-the-scenes workings of the engine with all the hidden timers and stuff like that. But yeah.
Well, it would be great if we could make a standalone tool for map analysis, and maybe other map makers could use it too. Or do you want it all to yourself and they can't have it?
Well, no, but I mean, in the long run, yeah, if you could have something like, I mean, there's a replay viewer based on Open Boudoir, right? You could probably have something where you upload a map and it gives you, I don't know, automatically plots your worker paths and gives you mining rates and run some analysis on whatever. But that's a bit more advanced, of course. I mean, for now, I just want some easy code that just tracks workers if they are selected, basically, and works on a prepared test map where I can set up specific combinations of minerals and pathfinding regions and stuff like that to test that out.
Well, you have to start somewhere, and I would love to see such a tool, and I would love to integrate into the SCHNAIL environment eventually, because at some point there is a map upload functionality as well. I see no reason why you couldn't add an evaluation or something to that pipeline as well. In the meantime, we have a question in the chat from someone named TCP Zerg. It's called, well, you can just read it and answer it, I guess.
Yeah, it's about 2v2 maps and double geysers. Well, the problem, of course, is that no, there aren't really any modern 2v2 maps because, or well, not anyone. So that would be officially used, at least, because well, 2v2 was dropped from Pro League at some point, and there haven't been any new 2v2 maps since then. But yeah.
I hear that
I've had some talks with that or with about, you know, they are planning to add 2v2, but they also don't have the resources to make it quickly. So, but the plan's there, right? So I've talked to Norman about it.
I'm sorry, just the critical part was cut out. Who did you talk to?
To Matt Sherman of Blizzard. He's like the community manager, I think is his title. So yeah, he's the guy I'm talking to about maps for DSL and ladder and stuff like that.
Wow, that's awesome.
There's some, but there are still no concrete plans for any 2v2 maps because there's still no concrete depth 2v2 on ladder. But if 2v2 comes on ladder, then probably we'll have new 2v2 maps. But before that, no. I also made another suggestion that maybe we could have a new game mode that's more dedicated to V2 and would allow shared spaces or shared or fixed team spawn type of maps like StarCraft 2 does, because that of course would allow for some even more specialized 2v2 map designs where, for example, teams could share mains or could share naturals, stuff like that. You can't do because you're just as likely on next to an opponent as next to your teammate, right? Well,
yeah, I remember not even 2v2s, but playing 4v4s, and we like restarted the game like 16 times until we got the top versus bottom layout. So
yeah,
crazy.
If you have, I mean, there are some top versus bottom maps that do this, but they need to be played as UMS, of course, and then you still have the, well, if it's a problem or not, okay, but you will know whether your team will spawn on top or bottom, right? There's no randomization in that. So if it's to be more like a normal melee mode, you probably want your team spawns to be randomized as well, right? But then your team still, it's, well, if you have a shared base, every one of the team spawns in that shared base, but it's not clear in what shared base you will spawn. Like, for example, if you have a map like, I actually did a map like this, wait. We'll see it here, something like this.
I will post the link in the chat in a second.
I can do it too.
It's called Joint Venture, right? Oh.
Yes. That's basically it's a 2v2 map. Or, well, you could play just 2v2, or you have shared mains, and then you have 4 possible spawns, right? And it would be great if there would be. I mean, I tried to actually trigger this in a way that would basically work that way, and even that's very you can't really, or it's very awkward and hard, because even if you spawn buildings and workers via triggers with Zerg, you have the problem that they spawn without any larvae, which is no good, right? So then you have to wait for a minute or so until your hatchery has spawned 3 larvae before you can start the game, at which point your test players leave the game. So I tried that. It would be great to have a dedicated mode that would support something like this, I think.
Yeah, we can only hope. I think that needs to be something done from the official Blizzard team. I can't really think of any way of circumventing this right now, and we are all about circumventing everything. Okay, so I think we talked this mining analysis thing through, because that's where we started with this talking point. And I actually had some basic questions to you, and these might sound naive from your perspective, but I'm a bit curious that how do you handle rush distances, for example? And feel free to go into the very nitty-gritty details, because that's what we are all about.
Well, I mean, normally I just try to make them as long as possible, because they tend to be too short on most layouts you can come up with, unless you do something like, let's say, what map was it? Benzene, right? Which has such a long rushing distance, because that's got this S-shaped path going on, which makes it naturally long. But if you have a map like, for example, in the way of an eddy, or a much more simple example in that same vein, like Ground Zero, for example, then basically you have to get something in between close positions to make it longer, or rushes will become very strong, right?
And there is a map. I don't know its name when it's like the entrance to the base is 1 unit wide. So one unit can only 1 unit can go in a base at a time. But I really don't recall the name of that map.
Which base? I mean,
Any main base, I guess, or maybe any natural, but the entrance to the player's main base at some point.
what do you mean? Only 1 unit can
Like
one at a time? It sounds like a normal ramp to me.
No. It's not a ramp, but a narrower approach. It's I don't know how to characterize it.
A very narrow ramp, or
No, it's not a ramp. Like it's level, but there are like high ground around, and it's just a very narrow choke.
tight choke between main and natural, or can have very tight chokes, but do they block certain units out completely, or?
I'm not sure, but I think they do. They like a zealot can fit through, but not a tank or something like that.
Is it some official like pro map or something like that?
I saw pro players playing on that. I'm not sure that was done on
recently, or
no, not recently. But I think we won't really find that map.
how many players? Which tile set?
The tile set was the same as of Eddie. I don't know from the top of my head.
Twilight.
Yeah, that one.
And how many players, or how many spawns?
I guess 3 or 4. I think it's a 4-player map, but I'm really not sure. It's not a 2-player map, I know. It was too large for that.
It was a square map. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we will not figure it out, I guess.
Yeah, I still don't understand what you mean by or what was so special about the joke you're describing. So.
Okay, I will try to find the map a little bit later, and we can talk about it. It's not really important. It's just it was just meant as a one-off example where a narrow choke can mitigate rushes a little bit. That was the point I was trying to arrive at, I guess.
Sorry, can you say that again? What?
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make is you can mitigate the effect of rushes maybe by having some narrow chokes. At least that was my impression. Hey.
Oh, hey. Sorry for being late. I started working spontaneously, but I guess to adjust that point, it would be Zerglings are the smallest unit, and they'll fit through any small chokes. So I don't think you can mitigate rushes that way. At least not very early game rushes.
You can make chokes that don't even let Zerglings pass, but then they are not actually chokes anymore.
They're called walls.
Yeah. Well, you can have semi-permeable barriers.
Funny thing is, you can actually make chokes that the engine considers passable, but that no unit can actually fit through, or that only scarabs could fit through.
That was exactly what I was thinking about. Can you make a wall that only scarabs can fire through it, and but Zerglings can?
Yeah. Let me look up something for a moment.
That would be funny. Let's make a map.
I have a test map like this. It's not really a playable map, not a playable feature in a melee map yet. It's some of many little things that I know of that I actually haven't ever put in a melee map. Lots of them are pathfinding related, of course. Internet is a bit slow today. Sorry. Now it shows.
Walkable tiles are 8 by 8 pixels, and Zerglings are like 14, 16? I've forgotten. But I'm pretty sure you need 2 by 2 walk tiles for a Zergling, but you could have 2 areas connected by less. But normally you wouldn't path between in there unless you had some other. It wouldn't path between the 2 regions unless you had a 2 by 2 gap connecting them.
So technically you can make a map called Protoss is not Imba, where you are full of these kind of chokes and reverse shut everything. In the meantime, I'd like to ask Ankmairdor that yeah, you had some technical difficulties, but let's go back to the beginning of the episode and basically what you've been up to lately.
Okay. Let's see here. So I think you guys covered some of it. While I was gone, I've been doing various researches into StarCraft as to various mechanics. So the big one for me was the research into the pathfinding. I did a deep dive and looked into how the pathfinding works both for short paths and the long paths. The short paths are the let's see here.
I just have one question after that. How are your PTSD treatments going?
Oh, yeah, that was a long thing. It took many weeks to read through all that code because it's broken down into very fine level. I don't know if that's a result of the decompiling issue or what, but yeah, lots of bit flags, and I had to figure out what those all did and label them. Uh, but yeah, I can get to that in a bit. But so I'll probably get these mixed up, but you have the region pathfinding, and then you have the position pathfinding. I forgot which is the long and the short. I thought they were mixed up, but because like the long, whatever. I'll get that later. But so the main thing I found was that when you had a positional pathfinding, is it will search in a boxes of essentially 65 pixels from the current position. So you can actually see this quite easily when playing StarCraft. Is if you pick a position that's just past 2 walk tiles away from the current unit, not like pixel aligned walk tiles, but just about that same sort of distance. You can estimate it based on looking at the tile set, and you can put a position that will be like 65 pixels over to the right, and then just a couple pixels downwards, and the unit will actually walk straight over and then turn straight down. Whereas normally you would expect the unit to just make a straight path to the point and then facing a consistent direction, but you can actually get them to do a sharp turn at the finish as a result.
They won't go diagonal, or
No, they won't go diagonally. I mean, they very slightly, but it will be almost perfectly straight for the first 99%, and then the last 1% of the trip, they'll actually turn steeply towards the next point. That's because it will try to choose between 8 positions within the 64 by 64 or 65 by 65 box. So the nearest the 2 positions to that the target destination would either be the center on the right. So if you're moving right, it would be the center on the right, or like the center on the bottom. But the
so
center of the bottom.
basically
Yeah.
It just as a target, it first picks a 2x2 tile area, and only if it reaches that region, if the unit reaches that region, it will zero in on exact coordinates. Or
so okay, so if you thought about it just as a 65 by 6, well, not a 65, but I guess I've gotten the sizes wrong, but 65 out, 64 out from every direction from the unit. So if you had 1 out from every direction from the unit, you would have a 3x3 box. So 64 out from every direction is like 129, I believe.
129, okay.
Yeah, because you have the center pixel as well.
Yeah, then it's 129.
Yeah, so 129 pixels out, so you have that size box. It doesn't pixel align it to the tiles or anything like that, but so if you had a point that was any point inside that box will be found immediately, and it will go exactly to it. So as long as you pick tell a unit to move within 100 that 129 pixel box, or basically within a 64 unit pixels in any direction, it will go directly to that point. It'll pick the perfect diagonal to that point. But as soon as you're outside of that box, it has to move to a new point before it can go from that point directly diagonally to the next point. So
that double the size, then mining could work on that logic. But okay, yeah.
yeah, so you'll see this in mining because the crystals are a minimum distance of 3 tiles, which means they are at least 96 pixels away that you have to travel. Well, I guess there is the size of the worker, but that's only 11 pixels from each side you lose. So you still have at least 64 pixels that need to be traveled. So you'll see this.
Say with 96 and 128 for setback minerals. So yeah.
Yeah. So you'll have at least 1 or 2 waypoints essentially. So each time it moves outside that box, it'll set a point, a travel point. It can be labeled as waypoints, but it's not the waypoint like every time you shift click a move command. It's internal to this current path waypoint. Not sure if there's a better way to call those, but so in mining, you'll see it as the unit will seem to go at either a straight or a straight one of the main diagonals. It'll tend to go in one of those 2 directions, and then it will adjust right before it gets to the mineral in order to head straight or on a more direct diagonal towards the mineral. This is pretty much the result because the nearest points that would consider is there are 8 nearest points possible within the 129 box, which basically, unless there's, of course, if there's obstacles, then it gets complicated. In the case of obstacles, it will attempt to add the corner positions of each obstacle, like the nearest corner. Even if it's a concave or convex corner, it'll add either one of those. And so you could have something that'll try and go just barely around an obstacle by going to that exact corner. So you might get some corner clipping occasionally, but most of the time it should be fine. But let's see. I think it was also related to why the vultures can't go through pylons when you tell them to, but they can if you tell them to stop. I don't know if you read that.
If you tell them to, if you time it just right, it seems so.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you read the post, but so the breakdown is.
No, go on.
Okay, so the simple breakdown is that there are 2 types of movement. There's movement within the pathfinding system that's basically intended by the pathfinding, and there's movement outside of the pathfinding system, which is like if the unit is stopping or coming to a stop, or just, after been given a stop command, or when they're turning. Floating units like vultures or air units will move beyond their turn point, so they'll keep moving forward even as they're turning. So they sort of veer outwards, and you get a sort of a fishtail effect or a swing out effect when they seem to when you do a harsh turn. It's pretty obvious if you're looking for it on a vulture because they move so fast. But all of the floating units do this. They will go, like if they turn right, they'll go up and then out to the right for a bit. So if you get a unit, if you got the vulture to go to the corner of 2 diagonal pylons and then have it turn sharply, it will fan outwards, or it'll sort of keep moving forwards, and it will find itself on the opposite side of the barrier by accident. It didn't intend to go there. It just that was the next
Yeah, that's-
step.
One frame it's on the one side of the gap, and next frame it's on the other, right? And because
Yeah.
the overlap where it could register a collision is so small, if the timing and position is just right, it doesn't even come to the actual collision detection.
So basically, it's drifting into the pile of wall.
Well,
Well,
sort of. It's sort of drifting past something which it would have thought as a barrier, because the pathfinding system sees the two edges of the pylons and then concludes that it's a perfect corner. There's no gap at all. Because it can't see the gap, even though the unit could perfectly move through without, I mean, assuming that you're not doing every possible collision check, which it doesn't. It only does if it actually lands on another unit, it will check for a collision. So it's entirely possible if you had a unit that could move 100 pixels per frame, that it would simply jump over everything.
tunnel through buildings.
Yeah, yes.
I guess it's like no one puts the vulture in the corner and it just jumps over.
So, so it actually considers in the pathfinding calculations whether there are buildings or not, and whether a unit can pass. That's what you're saying, right?
No.
No.
Okay. But okay, so specifically, the pathfinding does not care whether it's a building or terrain. It looks all the same. So
You mean it only knows the terrain and the regions and finds its path on that, right? So
it compiles all the units in the nearby area and all of the terrain in the nearby area.
what's
very
nearby?
limited.
What does it consider nearby?
But it
Is
only
is it
considers
the
a very
60
small region.
or 129 by 129 surroundings, or is it more?
I believe it's only within that area. You have to collide. So like if the corner of a building is within that region, it will consider that for the current movement.
Yeah, I mean that this is very significant, of course, for if you have buildings that influence mining, for example, or even if you have more mineral patches around, that has influence on how workers move, and I guess that's the effect. Yeah.
So there are potentially two layers. So there's region connectivity, which is going to have the biggest effect on more long distance. That's going to shape where the targets may go, but that's usually only if you are moving between 3 or more regions. If it's just 2 regions, you'll get some biasing towards the second region, meaning that if it's got if it explores multiple paths
And
in order to get
if
there.
it finds two paths of same length, it will favor the second one it finds.
Well, it's more than that. It will actually favor one in the target region, even if it's twice as long. So there's a biasing of distances where it will treat the current region as having a path that's twice as long as the next region. So if the mineral is in a second region to the worker, it will be willing to travel twice as far within the minerals region as within its own region. The effect of that is relatively small. You might compared to like the 129 box, the influence of that would be relatively small. You'll see that impact more on 3 region corners if you have to like go around an obstacle, because it will tend to bias into going through the second region to get to the third region, rather than going directly from the first region to the third region.
What it will favor going through a third region instead of going from one region to another directly?
It will favor going through a second region. So if there's a 3 region path, it will favor any path that goes through any region besides the first region, but it will also favor going through the second region. So it'll try to go 1, 2, 3. If it happens to go 1 to 3, it'll say, "Oh, that's fine," and it will just carry on as though it's reached region 3 ahead of schedule. But it will try and aim. The Pathfinder will give preference to any path that the first path it finds is, say, a path through the second region, and then it just happens to stumble upon a path that takes it directly from region 1 to region 3, unless that path for the distance traveled there locally, I guess, it is less than half the cost, it will ignore that shorter path.
Okay.
So even it's.
I mean, where I mostly observe it closely is in mineral mining, and there it seems like if there's a direct connection between two adjacent regions, it will always take this path and never go through a third region. So
Yeah, it will. Well, unless there was just so many obstacles that it forced it into another region, it would avoid going into additional regions just for the heck of it. So it will go region
for the heck of it, for actually finding the shortest path. But yeah.
Yeah, it will try to get out of the current region, even if that means ending up somewhere weird. If the destination is not the current region, so it tries to get into the destination region. That might take it into a strange neighboring region, but it would, in that case, it would prefer it. If you only have one region involved, so the worker and the mineral are in the same region at the start, then it will say, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter as long as I moved closer to the mineral, I've done my job." But
okay.
But that's basically that's why.
If it starts in the same region where it wants to move to, or where the mineral is, and then there's another region in the way, or something like that. That would be a very unusual layout, though.
Yeah, it would be
that
very
happens
weird.
very rarely.
Basically, like
no
that's more maze building than map building, but yeah, you could construct mazes where the pathfinding will do weird stuff.
I've done a map for fun where I just you can just draw pathfinding regions using different terrain levels, of course, and where I just drew very weird, chaotic formations, and well, the workers started dancing on that map instead of mining, and some just stopped at some point. It was very funny.
Yeah, they're part of the pathfinding, or the unit movement system is different from pathfinding. It's actually a give up. It just says, "I've tried." There wasn't an easy solution.
I tried. I got lost.
An attempt was made, and I'm willing to bet that this piece of code has a comment in the original code base that, I know this is a hack, but players surely won't notice.
Yeah, probably. Not players, but map makers and AI people.
By the way, there is I'm waiting for the first map named Hedge Maze, when you just make a literal maze of map. And maybe there are no geysers, so you can't make air units. Like a literal hedge maze out of terrain pieces. I guess Zerg could still float overlords, but
I did something like that one, and once, and on top of that, I made UMS without air units. You needed about an hour to get from one base to the other if your units didn't give up on the way, and everything was tight, and you couldn't really fight, and let's just say it's a very bad idea. Oh, and you know the what's it called? something crannies bug. Well, you can, if you have very many very fine structures, you actually reach the region limit for the map. So the engine can only process so many regions at game start, and if there are too many, it just crashes and gives you a bug, which is called I'm not sure what the first word was, something and crannies bug. There are too many something and crannies on your map.
Nooks and crannies. Nooks and crannies, that's the saying.
Nooks and crannies, yeah, exactly. Nooks and crannies. Your map has there are too many nooks and crannies on this map. It couldn't be loaded, something like that, and your StarCraft crashes. So that's something I ran into with it as well. But yeah.
I'd be curious how that relates to the limit in the pathfinding. So there's actually pathfinding system has limits on how many regions it will check. So it will only fan out to a certain number of regions, at which point it'll say, I've looked at enough places, and it will just sort of give up.
Probably why units just get lost in the maze on such a map instead of ever reaching their destinations.
Well,
yeah.
There's some really weird behavior by pathfinding if you get really long path lengths, and not necessarily in distance traveled, but the complexity of the path.
Yeah.
Like you can have so many regions that it will give up, and then it will only list the last few regions. So for the first, like maybe part of the path, it might be completely lost. It might say, I'm expected to be the next 50 regions forward from where I am. And it will say, oh, well, there's just a magic gap that's supposed to be crossed at some point here. So the unit will probably just give up at that point.
Yeah.
But I think we got sidelined somewhere on my description of the pathfinding.
Yeah, but I love it. And I especially love the fact that you made this absolutely sadistic map with the maze and no flying units, because that's exactly what I wanted to say that you should make, but you already made it.
256 by 256 and 8 players. So.
That's monstrous.
Yes.
It's the type of thing that you would play at a charity event or something that. And of course, you have to have
that once in the torture chamber I have prepared for the pathfinding guy. I have to play it forever.
I think it's enough if you just make a lot of mineral patches and set them to the maximum amount, because even if some unit arrives at the enemy, then it's no use.
You put so many minerals in a map that it reaches unit max, or?
No, I mean you somehow get your unit across the map and to the enemy, but the enemy will have more units and ample supply of resources, so the games just goes on forever.
Yes, exactly. What do you expect?
Yes, excellent.
That's the map. You have understood. Like, I mean, it was also like a fast map, right? With unlimited resources. So
this is the slowest map ever. So this is the opposite.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Never posted anywhere. Certainly not.
Come on, be brave. And what I love is that a journey that many bot authors go through is, oh my god, pathfinding is stupid in StarCraft, I'm gonna implement my own. Then, consequently, the poor author realizes that, actually implementing pathfinding is hard, and maybe that's why they didn't do it. And also it's resource intensive, and remember that StarCraft was running on made for PCs that are like 10 times weaker than your smartphone or more. And yeah. And I heard someone saying that, oh, why didn't they just use jump point search? That's such more effective. And then I notified him that StarCraft came out in 1998. Jump Point Search is dated to 2011.
What's Jump Point Search?
It's currently one of the most efficient pathfinding algorithms.
That's what StarCraft 2 probably runs on, or
I think not even StarCraft 2. But it is a pathfinding algorithm that is only usable on uniform grid maps, like we have on StarCraft. But StarCraft 2 is 2010, I believe. So I don't think the StarCraft 2 has Jump Point Search. I think StarCraft 2 is a little bit more handling the collision boxes a little bit differently. Like units can bunch up a lot more, and it's more fluid.
Yeah, I think it's particularly handling unit collisions and kind of different. I mean, it looks like a simulation of like a laminar flow of a liquid almost. So whereas Brute War looks like bumper cars. So
Yeah,
I think that's the main difference.
very stupid bumper cars.
They probably added more awareness of units, because right now Broodware units are just barely aware of each other, only if they're standing still.
Only if they bump into each other. Oh, there's something. I can't go there. I'll run.
Like they are
I don't know.
They are like an inverted T-Rex. They only can detect stuff when they are standing still.
Blind bumper cars is probably
the one thing that really could be improved is that pathfinding regions should at least be more compact with no weird things sticking out of them. That would help a lot already. So
the funny thing is that we actually have the source OpenDBW available, and there is nothing stopping people from rewriting it from scratch. But who would do that? Who would do that and why?
No, the bigger problem is, of course, that Blizzard would probably not take over any of the changes. So
no, that's just a joke. No one would want to do that.
I don't think we're all here in the first place for the...
I think however long it would take, if pathfinding regions were just a bit more, compact, that would save so much time in debugging maps. So, because those are the things that really, they're everywhere and...
Yeah, I haven't looked into how those are generated.
All I know is what Suicidal Insanity told me about it so far. First, it creates square regions of fully walkable or unwalkable terrain as big as it can. Then it starts to merge them, and in the third step, it merges the walkable and unwalkable parts of partially walkable regions into the rest. So yeah, and I guess the second step is the problem, because sometimes it just merges regions in a way that it's very weird results.
Yeah, I definitely saw the merging in the code, so I've seen that, but I wasn't sure how large they start, or what the initial starting point was. It looked like they started like every point was its own starting region, and then it just sort of grows from that. But I think it grows outwards or something. I don't know. I didn't look at that deeply, because that's a whole nother part of the problem.
Yet another rabbit hole, right?
But would it be possible to create a map analyzing tool that would at least be able to? Well, I'm not quite sure how it would actually be looking like, but that would be able to analyze ground travel distance from every tile would be sufficient, from every tile to every other tile, and then kind of visualize that in some way.
I'm pretty sure that David Churchill was working on something similar, but it wasn't. I don't think it was using the Brood War engine. It was just sort of using a flood fill sort of algorithm, I think. But he had some sort of graphical demonstration of the flood fill on Brood War maps. It was kind of interactive or something like that.
Yeah, what do you mean flat fill? Like it would just.
It just sort of expands
It wouldn't.
outwards and says this
Yeah, but
is
it
how many
wouldn't. It
tiles you
wouldn't.
travel.
But it would just do it on a tile by tile basis and consider like walkable, unwalkable, or something like that, but not the actual pathfinding thing that
Yeah, not
Reaper
Brood
does.
War.
Yeah, that would be useless then because, well, pathfinding regions are actually the problem with many of those, and particularly what I'm thinking about is, of course, the Riva freeze bug or Riva jam, as I call it, where Rivas just miscalculate their attack range because they use ground distance, of course, and not normal attack range because scarabs are units, and it's.
The Reaver problem should be relatively easy to compute because you're basically just it's if it's I forget the exact count, but I think it's if it's 3 regions or more, it uses the center distances of all regions involved.
Exactly. And then suddenly something that's 2 tiles away is outside the 8 tile attack range, which is horrible. But
Yeah,
so what you want to avoid is basically don't want small regions that are only, well, if it's a region which is actually just 1 tile wide, something like that, that's normally not that bad. But if it's some 1 tile or 2 tile wide, well, kind of spine that's coming out of a region, that's a real problem. Or if it's very often, it's also on edges of, like I am working on getting La Mancha improved, bug fixed right now, and I have this on all the bridges basically, because bridges have these sharp corners where they are connecting to the surrounding land, basically to the shore, if you want to call it that. Like, and you have these sharp corners, and then you have like 3 regions close to the corner, and you can't shoot around the corner.
Yeah, so the main issue there is, yeah, as you pointed out, it's the very long, thin regions, stuff like that. Mostly not because of the shape, but because the center of that region, it's computed based on, like, it's not like the average center, it's just the center from left to right and then top to bottom. It just divides that by 2, I believe. Basically gets you in the center of that. As you get the long regions, the center is further away than you would normally expect. So yeah, making sure that you don't have intervening regions where not necessary. I don't know if there's a way of. I'd have to look into the creation to see if there's an easy way of optimizing those out. But you probably have more experience with that than I do. But
You mean on a code basis or on a map basis? On a map basis, it's like,
yeah, the map.
yeah, you have to. It's a lot of trial and error because, well, of course the algorithm goes over the map, left to right, top to bottom, and that's the order in which you have to work over the map and change little. Normally, I try to just change little things along cliff edges and maybe put some tiles under Vespin geysers where they also don't matter, and try to adjust regions like that. But of course, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I'll see if I can do a deep dive on region creation at some point here.
But when you're building something on top of the geyser is actually getting destroyed. Does that mess up this in any way?
What do you mean?
No, because it still preserves the pathfinding as far as I know. Because well, because the geysers aren't walkable either way.
I mean,
Oh,
if
though
I put unwalkable tiles under geysers, or
clarify, Sanko?
Yeah, I mean, the game destroys the geyser object, and when you build something on it, and the refinery or extractor or whatever is created in the place where the geyser was. I was wondering if that messes up these regions somehow.
I don't think it kills it. I just think it changes which unit it is, right? It makes the geyser the building that's been built, and if it's destroyed, it's changed back to the geyser, but it retains the unit ID, I think.
Yeah, the unit pretty much, yeah, it's
same unit's left.
permanent.
Oh.
Yeah, but it gets reinitialized as part of the morphing, and so it takes on a different ID, I believe, as part of that, or somehow Bopwe thinks, the BWI API thinks it takes on a different ID, but I think that's where the perception of creating and destroying comes from.
Yeah, but I think internally, if you build on a geyser, the geyser is turned into that building. And if the building is destroyed, it turns back into the geyser. But it's the same in the list of all units. It's the same thing. It doesn't get removed and reallocated. It's the same memory position basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know in the BWI API
that's why
reassign it.
You can heal drones if you build on a geyser, because it's the geyser that turns into the extractor actually, and if you kill the extractor, a new drone is created.
Yeah.
And you can't do this with any other buildings.
But also, I guess to address the other part of the question is regions are generated when you start playing the map. So when you're loading it up, it's creating all the regions then, and it never reevaluates those. I know that much.
Makes sense anyway, because terrain doesn't change during the game.
Yeah. But it also there's some conflicts in the pathfinding because of that, because it will I forget where it was. There was some sort of it won't know where barriers are. It won't know the walkability because it's
you mean
only
buildings
considering
buildings and stuff like that. Yeah, it's not made for that. They never considered that people would start using mineral lines and neutral buildings and stuff like that to create maps with.
Yeah, like neutral buildings blocking off paths. Those aren't included in the pathfinding regions, and so it will say, "Oh, of course I can walk through here," and the pathfinding will say it can, even if you can see the building, because that's the path that was assigned.
Yes.
Because it's assigned a region path before it even looks at the pixel path. So it's already chosen the regions. It says you have to go from this region to that region. And so that's why the units behave so weird.
It can find paths around obstacles by, I guess, I don't know exactly how it works, but it seems to just if it detects a unit in the vicinity, it goes to the side, and if it strolls into another region, it probably evaluates long distance pathfinding across regions at some point. But
yeah, pretty much.
If the obstacle is too big, it just gets lost. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so if it comes down to the whole preference of regions things, it will try to get out of the current region as long as the distance isn't too far that things get messed up internally. But so it will. But if it finds itself in a region that is not along the region path, it will say, "I don't know where I'm at," and it will try to find a new path altogether.
That's what I thought. That has funny results sometimes. There was was it an ASL game? I think it was an ASL game on the map blockchain. Which has behind one of the mineral lines has a quick succession of multiple small regions, and it ended up causing a scarab to go all around the mineral line and back in from the bottom and hit some workers. That was very funny.
Yeah, scarabs are weird to begin with. They use a slightly different path or unit movement scheme than the standard one. It's slightly simplified, which is mostly okay because they don't have some of the same collision resolution issues, but they also don't have that handling, which is why you see them getting stuck a lot easier. They're basically just moving, and whatever happens, happens. But I mean, there's some.
So they are less effective at dodging obstacles.
Yeah, well, it's mostly moving obstacles. They can handle the not moving obstacles quite well. If nothing is moving, they'll say, "Oh, I can just path around," and they'll do it quite easily. You can test this on a custom map quite easily. Just create a line of buildings and then fire it to a target on the opposite side, and it paths around
That's
quite
fine.
reliably.
I mean that's quite important thing to consider in making maps, and I like to include it as a standard. If you block some choke with buildings or eggs, or have a mineral line which blocks some region of the map off, that you actually leave some scarab gaps so you can fire scarabs through that barrier. Because otherwise, well, I don't like it otherwise, because then reavers will just fire scarabs and they will dead out,
Dud out,
and you
yeah.
can't really use them to defend. And I think it's just better if you can actually use reavers there normally. It works fine normally, so yeah.
I have nothing to add to the pathfinding. I was just really enjoying your descriptions and discussion. Feel free to continue. And I actually don't really have any other points to talk about. So
Let's talk about pathfinding again. I mean, I was hoping that SCM draft would actually include a bit more in that regard, as I was working on it, I think, but somehow I guess other things got more important. So that might be another interesting project, map analyzer that basically does two things. For one, just plot out all paths between all bases, I think would be good, because that's between bases of any kind is, of course, the routes that units usually take on a map, and particularly between main bases. And the other thing, of course, is I'm still thinking about how that would work, but detecting reaver distances on the map, like, I don't know, probably go through all tiles, check all tiles in a physical radius of 8 around it, and look how far the actual travel distance as considered by the pathfinder is, and then mark tiles where it is shorter, and I don't know, maybe show the connection between tiles where it is longer. I mean, where this doesn't work out, something like that.
That would be very difficult to display because it gets very chaotic. There's a lot of positions, and also I think we'd have to come up with some sort of way of limiting it, because there are a lot of cases where you would expect reaver shot range to be limited, and like around corners of terrain and stuff like that, where it would fit expectations. So you have to basically create an equation for expected for
something like reavers firing down a cliff, which isn't supposed to be possible, right?
Yeah, or just
make
like
an exception for that.
Or if there's like a wall or something like that.
Or how the firing around a corner, like on a bridge, as I said, it's a problem in La Mancha, how that would work. Yeah, okay, so maybe
the main key I think here is that we're looking for a difference between expected distance and actual distance. So like, say if there's more than a 16 pixel difference between what would we expect to the Reaver to have, and what the Reaver actually has. That those would be the places where I think we'd want. And
exactly. Yeah, and I mean that's the actually finding a good heuristic for the expected distance would probably be a bit of a challenge for like cases where unwalkable terrain gets in the way. But except for that,
yeah,
I think that would be pretty straightforward.
I think, let's see here. So if you, let's see here, I'm trying to think of a way. Generally, you would just check to see if it's walkable or if there's a collision. You would need sort of, I guess one way would be to, that'd be really messy, but you could create a Zergling and just have it walk the path and say, okay, the Zergling walked in this much distance, and then this is how long that a Reaver shot.
It would also suffer from pathfinding region distortion in some way, because sometimes the Zergling path might also be very inefficient. So
yeah, there's that too, because
There
it might
is-
affect other units.
Yeah, there is the problem that the type of the unit that you use affects it. So and more so, I don't know how we could do that in BW API easily. I mean, you have to use the game's built-in pathfinding, right? So you can't.
that would be another thing to build on top of open brutal, I guess.
Most likely, because that's the only way to expose the Reaver comparison distances easily. Otherwise, you'd have to create the entire pathfinding for the BW API. That would be a mess. So yeah, it's definitely something you want to do with Open BW.
I don't see any other way at this point, to be honest. Well, you can technically do it with BW API, but it would be running like forever. I mean, you can do it with trial and error and just logging the results, but that would take an ungodly amount of time.
You mean like actually placing a Reaver? No. Well, it can't just create units, right? You would have to actually build them and get them to move to the
No,
right?
but you can you can create a unit, send it to one place, then send to other, then do it.
But if you use Open Brutal, you can just spawn a unit in any location. So
yeah, that's a little
Reavers
bit of
are slow. So having a Reaver crawl the whole map, even on sped up speed, that would probably take a while. So
even with the maximum possible speed in headless mode.
yeah, and that's still 128 by 128 tiles. It would have, well, not all of them, but and then it would have to. You would also need to have a target that you would have to have many targets, because of course Reavers tend to destroy targets pretty quickly, and would have to place that like anywhere in a 16 by 16 grid around the Reaver for every position, I guess. So that sounds like quite a lot to do.
Well, it can be done theoretically rather than practically speaking in some ways, because it's just a matter of getting the right functions, and you'd have to find a way of spoofing the existence of the unit at that location.
But I think that just directly calling some functions in Open BW would be much easier.
Yeah, just find the exact function and isolate it, and just feed it
yeah,
pretend parameters.
Well, just some of those functions assume the existence of a unit, and so there's many functions that you can't run unless you actually give it a unit.
yeah, but then
for instance,
you probably like.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, but then you could just spawn that unit in a location where you need it when in doubt, right? Which would take one frame and be done with it. So
Yeah, so that's one way. The other way is BW actually itself spoofs units for some of its own functions. So like for average movement speed, there are cases where it will create the innards of a unit for this one specific function in order to get the script to run on that part of the unit, and then it will. But at the end of a function, it just disappears. But it basically, for that one little part, it replaced the insides of the unit with a fake insides in order to get the function to run. It's really weird, but yeah, it's just a small tweak where you can tweak data points to spoof something running, or basically.
or you would have to just tweak some things inside the code itself or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Potentially, you could just change it so it could take arbitrary points and convert that into all the necessary data.
Just take the midpoint of each tile and measure distances from there. That's all you would need. So that would be sufficient at least.
Well, the only issue with that is that you have to provide it with a unit. It doesn't have to be, because it will consider, like the pathfinding will consider the unit size when doing the pixel distances. I think the region distances, though, you could probably get away without the unit, I think. Yeah, you just need a start and end position, I believe.
If you have a 3-region situation, so there's your unit region, your target region, and one region in between, does the exact position of the unit and or target in that case actually matter for pathfinding distance?
Well, not for that consideration. So it basically says the unit is in this region.
It's just node distances, right?
Yeah, I believe for the revert calculation of multiple region shots, it will only consider the regions. And it basically takes the long distance path and says, or the region path and says, these regions are involved, these are the centers of each region, as far as I know. And there might be some points used. I forget which points are not used. But yeah, you could probably do it, but you'd also want to do some sort of straight actual path or some sort of collision detection path, even if that's just cycling through each of the walk tile positions between the reaver and its target in order to get an idea of the expected distance. Because by checking the collisions, I think along the route, you could probably establish an approximate this is the expected distance. Because while the players won't know the exact collision distances and stuff like that, they'll have a pretty good idea where the collisions are for most things within 8 pixels. So I think if you just
but the question to answer is just, will it either fire or will it just freeze or
oh, okay. Yeah, if you just want to know whether it'll fire or
that's
freeze.
what the bug is all about. So will the
I'm
Reaver
just
have
thinking,
to crawl into contact with the target first, or will it actually fire from its expected range? Or you'll probably not be able to make it perfect. You probably have to live with some areas where you have an effective attack range of only like 5 or 6 instead of 8, right? But that would be good enough, I guess.
yeah, potentially.
Ultra is so badly written, some things you have to just live with.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think we can at least visualize it a little better, I think. It might be tricky, but yeah, I think it's definitely doable. But I guess the other thing you had was like the walkability between bases. That's pretty much doable. I mean, as far as region connectivity, that's fairly simple, I would assume.
I mean, you would just have to like you just take the starting location as some dummy building or some dummy unit on that location as a starting location, as a target location, and then run the Pathfinder over it, right? And then you could just iteratively let the movement algorithm run over it to get an exact path, I guess. I think that was pretty much what as I was doing for SDM draft.
Yeah, it's you pretty much because you can't just use the region distance because there are cases where the unit will actually potentially skip regions. It's the whole regions 1 to 3 problem where it'll try to go through 1, 2, 3, but there are cases where it'll just say, oh, it's simpler to do 1 to 3. And so you can actually end up with shorter distances than the region distance would actually tell you.
So it could find itself in a region where it wasn't supposed to go, and then it will recalculate the whole path, right?
That's a possibility, but it's less likely. The more likely case is that it will simply skip regions. So there might be like a 10 region path, but it may only travel through 8 of those regions because it won't do a new path because as long as the path the next region it finds itself in
Is on the
is
path.
along the path.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll just skip ahead
But
and
how
say,
can it
oh,
how can it skip regions along the path? I mean, if there's a let's say you can go through region 1, 2, and 3, or you can go directly from 1 to 3. Why would it ever take the path through region 2 then?
it would
I
have to
still
do
don't
with
quite
this.
understand.
There's a difference between center regions. Well, part of it is has to do with the A star heuristic. So let's say if we had 3 regions in a sort of a triangular setup, but so you start in 1, and if you go towards your target, that'll take you to 2. If you move back
Why would
away
it
from the
take you?
target, it will take you to
Why would
3.
it take? Why would it ever take you to 2? Normally, it would avoid to even enter 2.
Well, if there was like a culvert, so say we had like a half circle arc, and we start inside the arc, or on the far side of the arc, and then our target's on the other side of the arc. So that if there's one region inside the arc, and we're in another region, like say the inside of the arc is one region, we are in a region before that, and then off to either side of the arc, there's another region. So going into the arc.
What do you mean by arc? What kind of arc?
Like so, let's say we had a wall of high terrain that formed like a half circle, like something like you might um, just like that. If you were to walk in towards the center of that into the arc, you have. Or here, let me back up. You would the A star will say, "Take me to the region which is closer than the current region." It doesn't know what's beyond that. It doesn't know where the obstacles are. So it will say if the
And so
straight
it
line
might avoid
distance.
it might avoid an obstacle and stray into somewhere where it's not supposed to be yet, or
Well, it'll try and go a straight line distance, but let's say if we have a half circle arc that will catch us, it will walk in towards the half circle arc region and saying that was closer than my previous region, but that the half circle arc region means that once I've entered it, I have to go to either side. Whereas if I was being smart about it, I would have gone to either side first rather than going into the half circle arc region. I don't know if this is actually a actual case that can occur, but it's more of a theoretical construct, which I have to experiment with the SCM draft to know if I can actually create this scenario. But It's basically the idea is that you could find yourself walking straight towards your destination, but it might take you to into a region which is not a shorter path, but it is closer to the destination.
In my experience, that normally doesn't happen unless something gets in the way. So, like units will actually.
You wouldn't.
They
You won't
will
see it in
normally
units.
avoid other, not in units. Yeah. What
Yeah,
else? What else does
the units won't actually have this problem because they have a different path than the region path. Because they can skip regions, and they can go from region they don't target the second region as their goal. They have a goal region and a goal point. The goal point will always be in region 3, but the goal region will always be region 2. If you have 3 regions, so it will be aiming for region 3, or the unit will be aiming for region 3, but it will give preference to region 2, which is it helps it get around obstacles. But it also means that you can end up skipping region 2. But when it's generating the path of regions, it might generate a path with a region that is less than optimal because it was the shortest path. I'm trying to think of a good case that would describe this.
I think we would actually have to, have a piece of paper and a pen to draw something and write some formulas or something. It's hard to follow.
Okay. Yeah, it's I'm trying to keep track, guys, but I think it's getting harder and harder.
I'm still stuck on, okay, there's a concave piece of terrain, and then
yeah. So I guess the way I think of it is in the simplest form is if we had 5 regions set up kind of like a plus sign, but if you could travel
one in the middle and 4 around that.
Yeah, and then the arc prevents
and the 4 around are connected, or
4 around are connected, but you could only travel all the way around the outside, but you can't travel directly through the center, so you couldn't go from bottom to top, mostly because the concave prevents you from going from the center to the top. If that makes sense.
Where's the concave?
So I consider the concave as blocking off one of the outer regions from the inner region. So it's just a single line, basically, that prevents you from getting to, say, the center.
So the outer region then is an island.
There's no islands in this thing. It's just you've got almost all connectivity between the 5 regions, except you can't go from the inner region to one of the outer regions.
Okay, but then it would try to find a path around whatever terrain is blocking that. So,
but that's
more regions to consider.
Well, so the idea is that the shortest region path would be to go around the outside in either way. So you would take you wouldn't ever use the center position. The center region wouldn't ever be included in your path because you would have the obstacle.
Yeah.
But the pathfinding doesn't actually work like that. The pathfinding will always include the center region because it's the closest region along a straight line distance from the starting point to the ending point. So if you're trying to move from the one far side to the other far side, like a straight line, it will say, I'll go to the center, but I can't go from the center to the destination directly. So I have to go to one of the sides. So it'll go out to the side, and then it'll go to the destination, which means it will, of the 5 regions, it will have traveled through 4 of them. Whereas any humans would draw a path containing only 3 regions.
Well, I'm not sure that would really work out that way. I mean,
I don't know if it's a yeah. It's,
once it has actually run through all the paths and determined the shortest one, wouldn't it just drop any inefficient ones where it would make a detour through the center one?
no.
If it
You-
could go
Brood War-
directly around.
It does. Brood War does not do any optimization. It only considers each region in turn. There's no further optimization, no consideration of additional paths, unless that's a natural consequence of exploring the regions. It won't generally do that.
But it will generally try paths through or adjacent regions, right? It won't just skip some regions because it has already considered them in a previous step, or
so it's part of the A star. A star is a greedy algorithm, in that it will try to go with what it believes is to be the shortest path, the next shortest path. So it may not consider all possible paths. It will just consider the next that it believes is best. So it will only try those which I think it thinks will lead to a faster conclusion, but it won't try to optimize out all the little kinks in the path.
Yeah.
It's because its goal is to try to aim for.
It stops basically when it has found a path, right?
Yes.
Then thinks that's the shortest one.
It doesn't care whether it's the shortest. It just says, I found a path. That's good enough.
Okay, if I found it first, that's probably good enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the algorithm is designed to say that if I'm looking for a path and I'm taking the probably optimal search for that path.
If you have a situation where you have like three regions in a triangle, and in the one it directly goes to the better one within the triangle, basically the one from which the path would go on, or that is the target, and a third one, then unless it calculates node-to-node distances in a way that doesn't observe triangle inequality, it should always go to the better region first, right, and not take a detour through another region. That's what I mean.
Yeah. So if there are only three regions involved, then it will always choose the closer of the region. I think I may have oversimplified early on.
Wait, I think I have an idea what you could mean. It could mean that the path that it finds eventually just goes through fewer regions, but not through the shortest possible distance, right? That could happen.
Not necessarily. So the region path isn't. Let's see. I think probably have to get some drawings or something like that, because it does.
Okay, guys, sorry to interrupt, but I think you're kind of going in circles for a while now, and really we should move on to a different topic. I lost track a few sentences ago. I really tried to follow, and I think the audience is kind of the same way.
To ask you the questions or something?
Well, I thought I leave you to it, and but I have to.
I don't think we're getting anywhere with that.
I have to cut it short. Well, I'd like to cut it short. So actually, it's a very interesting topic, but maybe this is not the best format to discuss it right now.
Yeah. Were there ever more than 5 people watching? I don't know. But yeah.
Most of the people actually listen, do not listen to the podcast live, so do not concern yourself with it.
Oh, well. Yeah, it's too complex, I think.
Yeah, I think it is, and you really need drawings. And this podcast is meant to be consumed in an audio format. So, yeah. Unfortunately, the last few minutes of the audio were lost in the recording. I don't know what's the cause, but we just said goodbye. So I will say goodbye to you now as well.